Hello, my name is Audrey Emran Beardsley. I'm an associate professor at Arizona State University, and today I'm speaking in admiration of Dr. James Banks from the University of Washington. Hello, Dr. Banks.
Fine, how are you?
Good. We are going to talk to Dr. Banks today about his personal and professional history, and we're going to start with your personal past. Tell us about where you were born.
I was born in the Arkansas Delta in a very segregated community, and I grew up on a farm. And actually, I picked cotton as a very young child and helped in the fields. So it's been a long journey from the Arkansas Delta to Seattle.
Sure. Tell us about your parents.
My parents were both farmers.
Okay.
My dad was from Mississippi and my mother was from Arkansas. And when he migrated to Arkansas, they met and somehow married. So they were both Southerners. And my mother's people were from South Carolina.
Oh, okay.
And his people were from Mississippi. So I have a long pedigree of farmers and Southerners in my background. So
Tell us about your earliest experiences in school.
Well, my earliest experiences were quite interesting because when I first went to schools, the schools had not consolidated. And I had to walk 5 miles to school. But that was kind of fun because as we walked to school, we picked up kids on the way.
Oh, sure.
So it was kind of fun. And then we walked about 5 miles to school. And that was when I first started to school, was first grade, because African Americans didn't have kindergarten. Whites may not have had them either. I mean, I'm not sure, but so it was first grade. But then when I was about third grade or so, early, the schools consolidated, and then the school buses would run. But I remember when we were walking to school, the white kids already had buses. And one of my most poignant memories when the white bus would pass us, would spill mud on us.
Oh.
And so I remember that very, very poignantly. And that was one of my earliest childhood memories. But the idea of walking to school for 5 miles, it sounds like a lot of miles, but actually we had fun. And we would pick up kids as we went on to school. And,
Sure.
And by the time we got there, we were a pretty big group.
Sure.
Yeah.
It was kind of a social event.
It was a social
Playtime,
event.
recess.
And it was also, there was also bullying, though. I remember this kid used to bully me, and finally my brother said, if you don't stand up to him, I'm going to punish you. And finally one day, when he started to bully me, I came back on him, and he was shocked. And he never bothered me again. So we had all kinds of events happening on the walk to school. It was fun. It was also some conflict with bullying, and it was all of the diversity among kids.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
So it was, in the end, fun. I have pleasant memories of the walk to school.
What type of student were you when you got to school?
I'm sorry, what type of student was I? You know, I remember when I first got punished in school, my mother had given me our lunch. We took our lunch to school, and when I got hungry, I just started eating. And the teacher had a ruler and said, "You're eating, you don't eat until lunchtime." But so that's one of my early memories. I learned that you wait till lunchtime to eat your lunch. But I think I was a conscientious student. I don't have strong memories about being that competitive in elementary school, but I think I was a good student, and I worked hard. And I have more memories about how hard I worked in college. But I think in school I was a good student.
So what did you learn in your early childhood memories of schooling that inspired you to become the person you are today?
Well, you know, I think that's a very good question. And I think one of the things I learned was that I saw kids as bright as I am, or brighter, who fell by the wayside, who didn't make it in that little Arkansas community. Wilfred, my best friend, you know, he dropped out at, I think, 6th or 7th grade. And I developed this real strong commitment to really make it possible for more kids who were black and poor to be successful. And I started out with black studies, but actually my work expanded. Perhaps we can talk about that later. But so I had this dream of doing something to help more kids be successful in school that I knew were just as bright as I am, if not brighter. and to do, so that became a real commitment to do something to help more kids be successful academically, particularly those who were poor and those who were Black and those who were disadvantaged.
So that's when you entered into college. You had this inspiration, and
I did. It was before I entered into college. It was
Okay.
when I was in high school. I had this dream. I used to dream about creating a school for Black kids in the South,
Okay.
and it was a dream that I had. And we used to play school. My cousin from St. Louis used to come out, and we would switch being the teacher.
Oh, sure.
So that was a really interesting experience to look back upon. And I was very academic as a child. I had books, and they called me Fessor,
Right.
the community people. They didn't say professor, they said Fessor, Little Fessor,
Little Fessor.
which was so really interesting.
They knew something that you didn't know at that point, huh?
Yeah, I think so.
Tell us about your experiences in higher ed then.
In higher ed, my first, of course, went to Michigan State where I got my doctorate. And then my first job was actually, I taught fifth grade in Chicago and in Joliet, Illinois. And then my first academic job was here at the University of Washington. And I was actually hired to teach social studies, but they asked me to teach social studies with an urban focus. And that was very interesting too, because my chairman of my department was very famous, John Geralmek, a famous social studies educator. One of the reasons I came to Washington because of the excellent reputation in social studies. So I was teaching this social studies method. That's really was what I was hired to teach. Multicultural education didn't exist at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I added a book to the course called, it was a book on Black history, The Negro in America by Benjamin Quarles. And one of my two students went to my chair and complained and said, there's too much about Blacks in the course. And so they went to my chair, and this was a very powerful and interesting experience. I still remember it. And my chair, he listened and he talked to them. And in the end, he said, Jim, your ratings are very good. Keep doing what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So that was, I developed a deep fondness for him because, of course, they had their first Black teacher, probably in their lives. Mm-hmm. And so this, the book was called The Negro in the Making of America, was the exact title, by Benjamin Quarles. And so that was a very important experience for me. It meant that I understood that there were some students, most of my students were white females because it was a methods course in mm-hmm. social studies. And most of the students in that course, I don't teach that course today, but are still white females because mm-hmm. that hasn't mm-hmm. changed. Mm-hmm. But they had probably never had a Black teacher before, and of course I was a Black man, so I think it was both the content and the medium. Mm-hmm. The Black professor that added a book about the Negro in the Making of America. So that was a very interesting experience. But what I learned from it is that I had support from my chair, and that I would have to, sometimes would get white students who weren't used to ethnic content. So that was a very interesting experience, and a very important one, that I got support, that sure. I was introducing things that were a little different, but that my chairman did support me.
Did support what you were
trying to do.
Trying to do.
Yeah.
Tell us about your wife, Sherry.
Well, Sherry and I met in graduate school at Michigan State.
Okay.
And in those days, of course, in the dorm, we were both living in Owen Hall. But in those days, the women lived on one side of the dorm and the men on the other. And you'd see each other at the common room, which was meals. So she had majored in microbiology as an undergrad, but was taking some social science courses when we met. And a friend introduced us who was actually an instructor at Michigan State. And so she asked me if I had the Kerner report. And that was, so we have this joke about the Kerner report. And I did have the Kerner report. It was a report about the riots of the 1960s, chaired by Governor Otto Kerner of Illinois. And so I had a copy. I had my own little library in my room at Owen Hall. So I said, I do have the Kerner report, and I'll go get it for you. And so we met over the Kerner report, and I asked her shortly after for a date, and we were engaged within a couple months and married within 6 months. So, and then she when I finished, I was almost, it was just months before I got my doctorate at Michigan State that we met. So we got married in February of '69, and I came here in that summer, but started here in September of '69.
When you got your doctorate at Michigan State, did you know that you wanted to be a professor at that point?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that was the goal.
Yeah, that was the goal. I was in the social studies methods.
Okay.
My advisor, William Joyce, was in social studies education. He'd gotten his doctorate at Northwestern. And Theodore Calsonis, a professor here at Washington, was visiting Michigan State, and I got introduced to him. And he was telling the story the other day that he had told his chair when he got back, John Jeromek, we must recruit that young man.
Oh, okay.
He said he was very impressed with what I had done. I had co-authored I had co-edited 2 books with my advisor. And
while a student.
Yeah, while a student. And and I had written some articles also.
What was your dissertation study?
It was the study of the Negro, as we used the word then, the Negro in textbooks.
Okay.
And by the time the article was published, I changed the word to black because black became more in vogue at the time. But it was the Negro and the content analysis of the Negro in textbooks.
And what were the findings?
The finding was that textbooks basically left out blacks except for slavery, and when it did treat, and then it had really 3 blacks in textbooks, usually Booker T. Washington, the educator, George Washington Carver, the scientist, and Marian Anderson, the contralto. So other than slavery, you had the 3 blacks, and we disappeared. And when blacks were treated, they were happy. The slaves, for example, in my textbooks were happy. And that was one of the questions that became very powerful for me, is who depicted these image of the blacks as happy. So my dissertation was about the image of blacks in textbooks.
Okay. Talking to Sherry, she explains that the 2 of you are a team, and as such, you are partners, parents, friends, and professional colleagues. She adds that the nature of your relationship is that you like each other. Simple as that. Tell us about your children.
Yeah, we have 2 children, Angela and Patricia. Angela is our older daughter, and she's a lawyer who lawyered for a while, and then she became a college professor at the College of William and Mary in Virginia. And both of our daughters are interested in social justice issues. And Patricia, our younger daughter, got her PhD in sociology from Harvard. They both graduated from Harvard, although they went to Spelman as undergraduates, which is a predominantly African-American school that really was very affirming for them. They grew up in this community, which was predominantly white, which meant white except for the Bankses at the time. And so when my daughters finished elementary and high school out here, they were very interested in getting a very affirming experience about culture and also a small institution at Spelman College. So Spelman is one of the historic black colleges, and they had a wonderful experience there. And then after Spelman, they were ready to go to Harvard, and they enjoyed both worlds.
Your daughter, your youngest, Patricia, cites your ability to combine a rich family life and a life dedicated to increasing equality and justice among your most significant accomplishments. She recalls childhood memories of you writing in your study, even when she and her sister interrupted you for play breaks. She remembers that you handed them a piece of white paper attached to a brown clipboard with a pen and invited them to join you. Accordingly, she credits you with engendering her own passion for writing and scholarly commitment to investigating cultural boundaries. Your older daughter, Angela, describes your early school experiences, noting the frustration you had growing up about the portrayal of African Americans in school textbooks and how you turned it into a field of study. She adds that because of that field of study, her textbooks and K-12 education were vastly more inclusive than yours. Tell us about your scholarly commitment to issues of social justice, for which you have now received numerous scholarly awards.
Well, I think that, and I always tell students, they ask me, what should they study? I say, study something you have a passion about. And I think that I still have, it's been constant, a real passion for equality and social justice And I think that keeps you going. I mean, when you wake up every day, what keeps you going? I think you have to have a real commitment. Trying to bring about equality is a very powerful motivator, because my notion of equality and bringing about justice keep it expanding. I first was concerned primarily about African American kids, but then when I met people like Carlos Diaz and Carlos Cortez, I understood that Latino kids also have injustice. And Eleanor Bloomingberg taught me about the struggle of Jews in American society and in the world. So it kept expanding. And now I'm also have added to my concerns lesbian, gay, and bisexual kids. And so the notion of trying to work for more justice in the world is a wide one, and it's a lifetime of work. And my notion of it keeps expanding to different groups. So it's something that's never ending, and it keeps me going. And it keeps me, that's why I wake up in the morning to say, how can I increase justice in my community, in my nation, and then indeed in the world, because I'm doing a lot of work on ethnic groups in other nations right now.